2020, it's just around the corner. We made it, you guys. We did it. We did it. We did it. It wasn't a clean run up to this point. Humanity kind of limping over that mark, but we're still human race, still going. But as we all know, the world may well end in 2020. Did you not know that? I thought it was common knowledge. But if it did, boy, how have we been spending our last moments thinking about the one video game from the last decade that we would save. That's our hypothetical question for today's video. If all of the video games from the last decade were going to be destroyed and you could only save one, which would you choose?
Wait, hypothetical? I already destroyed all mine.
Oh, Mike, no, it was hypothetical, buddy. Oh boy. Okay, well, we got Okay, so everyone from Outside Xbox and Outside Xtra will be saying the one game that they would take from the last decade into the glorious future, into the ark that all humans will be hiding in, playing the 5 best games, or at least the games we think are best. I hope everyone else likes them. Fortnite's not on here, sorry guys.
Literally on the ark.
Hoping you weren't wanting Fortnite in the ark, it's not in here.
Hello! I've been thinking about my game that I would like to save and take into the space arcs that I've been promised. You will get a trip on, apparently. Oh, what? Just the game?
Just the game.
No humans. Just 5 games. The Council of Elders.
In a big empty hangar.
I thought about racing games. Obviously, I love my racing games. I think Forza Horizon 4 as the kind of realization of all the stuff they were kind of going for in that series, and as a very accessible and instantly enjoyable racing game, that deserves a mention, but I did not choose it. Also, I thought about Skyrim, because Skyrim is definitely the game I've bought the most over the last 10 years. I bought the 360 version, bought the Xbox One definitive version, I bought the VR version for PlayStation VR, and I bought the Switch version, and probably it'll come out on mobile phone at some point, and me, like a mug, will buy it again. Never completed it, obviously, but there's a world I love spending time in. But a world I love spending more time in is the world of Dark Souls, yes. What I love about Dark Souls is just how bleak and lonely it is, which sounds like a weird thing to like, but it's just got such a identifiable atmosphere to it, and like loneliness and solitary nature, which means you can't interact with it superficially. There's none of this kind of like, oh yeah, I'll play this, knock about, blah, blah, blah. It sort of just drags you in and sucks you into this really lonely, explorational kind of experience. And I just love wandering around that world and cracking it open. The moment where I unlocked the first shortcut down from the Undead Parish all the way back down to Firelink Shrine, and I realized that the entire thing fits together like Lego but with horrifying monsters in it, was incredible. It was a real like revelatory moment, and that was the moment where the world went from a kind of abstract series of corridors and things to a complete space, and a complete space that you can navigate and kind of understand in your mind and hold in your mind. It's so evocative, it's got its own mythology, it doesn't just dish out story like, you know, most games. It really keeps its cards close to its chest, and you've got to really work to uncover stuff. And I think it's cast such a long shadow. And I know it's kind of become a bit of a joke, you know, comparing things to Dark Souls, but what that joke doesn't reflect is that it's been so influential that it has inspired, you know, games might not be like Dark Souls clones in the way that everything was like a Doom clone back when first-person shooters were brand new, but a load of people have cherry-picked mechanics and bits and bobs from that game and inserted them into their own game, such as things like going back for your loot after you've died as one last chance to sort of redeem yourself. The biggest recent example is Jedi Fallen Order, which I'm loving, but is a very like mainstream take on kind of Dark Souls mechanics, and I had not anticipated just how close to Dark Souls it was going to be. And I love the idea that people will play Jedi Fallen Order, which apparently is the fastest selling Star Wars game of all time, and they'll play that and then they'll go, right, give me something more hardcore, and it'll be Dark Souls, or it'll be Bloodborne, or one of the other games in the series. But I think one of the misconceptions about Dark Souls is that it's like a hard game. Everyone's, no, it's not hard.
Really hard.
It's not. It just requires patience and mastery. And I am not good at video games. I'm absolutely not good at video games. As long as you have the patience to sit down and get your head around the timing and the combat and things, you'll find that maybe, you know, after a modest amount of time, perhaps 5 hours or so, it will get its claws into you and you won't be able to stop playing it forever, basically. I do have a confession, which is that I have not finished Dark Souls yet. But it's because I'm taking my time and I don't want it to end. And also...
Shocked.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that just sense of discovery, the chance to unlock these new... You know, there's a moment where you go to Amalur for the first time and it's just the most stunning reveal because the whole rest of the game you've been like wallowing in the mud, basically, and it's grim and it's dark and it's full of gross stuff. And then you're carried up over the wall to Amalur and suddenly it's beautiful and there's a sunset and the light striking this amazing Gothic architecture. And you realise that actually, again, it's played with your conception of what the game can be and it's turned into something beautiful. But again, it's still bleak and lonely.
What if the ending's really bad?
Well, yeah, maybe it's like a musical number. That would be awful. Oh God.
Well,
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's all like a really elaborate dad joke or something. I have faith that it ends well. I know Luke has finished it. It's still not been bettered in terms of that just solitary exploration feeling. And I feel like I could spend years in that world finding little bits of lore, and it's so beautifully crafted that if I'm going to be on a space arc forever, or not, as I've just found out, I feel like that's the game I could play for years on end.
An eternity in space is probably the right amount of time for Ornstein and Smaug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Finally I'll get there after 30 millennia floating in the abyss. Like I said, I'm bad at games, so it's going to take me a while. There have been sequels to Dark Souls. I don't think they've quite captured that sense of, mainly the sense of an interlocking world. I think Dark Souls 2 cheated a bit. Dark Souls 3 is better at that thing where you kind of stand on one side of the world and you look over and you can see something a mile away, and then eventually you'll have worked your way all the way down to it, having died about 400 times in the process. But there's nothing quite like the magic of Lordran, which is the world of the first Dark Souls, and the way it fits together and the variety and the way it just becomes a familiar place to you, and you suddenly have commuting routes and a series of chores you want to tick off before you stop playing the game, and so you run through areas that you're comfortable with and you can kind of come back having leveled up, and all of a sudden, rather than being the sort of hunted, you're the hunter and you're able to smash things flat with a giant Zweihander and things like that. There's just so many little nuances to it that are beautifully designed, and at the time, I mean, other than Demon's Souls, which is kind of the precursor but didn't have that full sort of open world, it was totally unique. No other game played like it, no other game looked like it. It's just had a lasting effect on me.
This was a tough one, but not that tough. Honourable mentions go to Undertale, which is the best indie game I've ever played and is a game that really gets under your skin. An absolute masterwork. The game that has the biggest looks ropey to destroys your heart ratio of all video games ever. And another honourable mention to Life is Strange, which is a really, really beautiful series. I'm so glad it exists. I feel like before Life is Strange, there wasn't really anything filling that gap. I feel like Life is Strange has made it okay for video games to make you have feelings and to bawl your eyes out, and I just love it. Those games are clever and beautiful, and I think it's great that they exist. That said, come on guys, it could only be The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It's not just the best game of the last decade, it's the best video game ever made. It's the best game made to date. I'm not exaggerating. What was interesting was looking down the list of games. We had like a short list of this kind of ideas, like maybe to help you choose kind of which games you want to pick, and looking at all of these incredible games from the last 10 years. And looking down it, I really got the sense that everything was building towards Breath of the Wild. I feel like it's an apotheosis of video game gameplay and design and storytelling. It is the greatest open world game ever made. The open world that you inhabit in Hyrule is stunningly beautiful. It's quiet and empty and evokes this feeling of loneliness, and yet somehow, wherever you are, there's always something to do, and it's always surprising and odd and quirky, just takes your breath away with the sheer invention of it, and just the idea that they started with an area that big and managed to fill it with things. Every part of the map feels distinct as you start the game, and you don't have any of the clothes or the potions that you need to kind of go into the difficult areas, like the fiery areas or the cold areas. You feel like you're struggling up this incredibly steep slope, especially when you're climbing up an incredibly steep slope, which, sidebar, the greatest traversal. Have you tried playing Breath of the Wild and then going back to Skyrim where you can't climb the mountain? It's infuriating. It's ruined other open world games for me where you can't climb the thing. It seems so obvious. Why did no one think of climbing the thing? Climb it. It's so much fun. And the hang glider, it makes getting around a real pleasure. You have fast travel in the game to fast travel to places you've been before, but 9 times out of 10, you genuinely won't use it because being in that world and moving around is so much fun. It's full of everything you would expect from a Zelda game. Incredibly good puzzles, really funny NPCs and characters. And a really earnest, simple story about trying to defeat evil. If you're a Zelda fan, it's got some really interesting things that it does to the Zelda timeline and the Zelda canon. The idea is that this incarnation of Ganon that you see in Breath of the Wild is the last one. Zelda, Link, and Ganon in the games, the idea is they're always like reincarnated, these kind of like 3 elements of the Triforce, so they're always like repeating through time. So if you're a Zelda fan, there's something there for you. When I was trying to decide if Breath of the Wild should be on this list, a little thought experiment I ran was, would this still be my favourite game if it wasn't a Zelda game? And it's tougher because I'm a huge Zelda fan, so I bring a lot of that love to the game already. And when you get the Master Sword, it's still getting the Master Sword. The Deku Tree is right there. It still has that emotional resonance, but honestly, sad to say, if it wasn't a Zelda game, there's every chance I wouldn't have played it, but had I played it, I'm confident it would still be my favourite game of all time. It's an absolutely staggering achievement in every way, and I played it for dozens and dozens of hours, and every single hour was a joy. And the way that it looks, anywhere you are, you can cast your eye around, and I've played open world games that are way more technically accomplished visually, like The Witcher 3 comes to mind, which is an absolutely beautiful game. But what Breath of the Wild has is that magical Ghibli-esque colour palette, and you realise that actually that's 90% of the work of a beautiful game. It's just the colours. The colours are so gorgeous. It has this cel-shaded style that is never going to go out of fashion. It's like The Wind Waker still looks like an incredible game now. Breath of the Wild is not going to date because it looks beautiful. From a sort of meta point of view, if you're looking at the video game industry, it was a really brave thing to do when the Zelda games regularly are big hits and everyone loves them, but are essentially have been quite formulaic. To have the nerve to tear that up and do something that is so different and so audacious. People have this idea that Nintendo exists in this weird kind of little bubble, kind of apart from the rest of the video game world. In a sense, that's true, but when you play Breath of the Wild, you're like, oh no, they were watching. They were looking at Skyrim. They were looking at games with crafting. They were looking at Dark Souls. They were watching and they were like, I think I know how that should be done. So it's the complete package. It's the only game I could imagine saving from a fire from the last 10 decades.
The last 10 decades?
Yes, the last 10 decades. That's right. Bad luck. Pick up sticks and dominoes, and dominoes probably older than I don't know. Yeah, but sorry about it. Ball in a cup. Breath of the Wild's got my vote. I don't know what to say except that it is the complete package. Whatever you want from a video game, it's there. I love it completely.
Solitaire.
If you like solitaire, you'll love being all alone in Hyrule Field with only the wind whistling and the faintest little bit of tinkly piano music. You couldn't even call it music. It's just like a just kind of in the background. Stunning, stunning.
Which Zelda game is it displaced as your favourite?
It's displaced Ocarina of Time as my favourite Zelda game, and also probably displaced Ocarina of Time as my favourite game ever. I have played a little bit of Ocarina of Time since playing Breath of the Wild. Obviously, it's still a delightful game, but I don't know, you just want to run at a wall and climb up something. It's amazing that they managed to get all of the good stuff from those old Zelda games into a completely different open world format. How has it been done? I'm baffled.
When Ellen and Luke came to me and said, Jane, you have one game that you can rescue from the flames, or however the world is going to end in 2020, as assuredly it must, I said, well, guys, it has to be Mass Effect 2, because obviously it's Mass Effect 2.
Shepard. They'll follow her. She's a hero, a bloody icon.
Thank you. All right, good. Well, I'm glad we're all agreed then. Video over. Mass Effect 2 it came out in January 2010, so it's right on the cusp. It's nearly its birthday.
Why did we bother with the rest of the decade?
Right, we could have just packed up at that point, ended the world 10 years earlier.
Get straight on the arc.
Yeah, get in that escape pod, jettisoned straight off to space. Yeah, Mass Effect 2 is my perfect role-playing game, power fantasy. It combines my favourite fictional genre, science science fiction and space opera with my favourite game genre, which is heavily story-based role-playing games with boyfriends. Or girlfriends if you prefer, or a mix of both. That is what makes Mass Effect 2 the game that I would take with me onto the space arc and play for as long as I can. I'm generally a fan of that BioWare approach to a role-playing game, approach to storytelling, approach to character and character-driven RPGs, obviously. But there's something specifically about Mass Effect 2, I should say, that really got me in every way it's possible for a game to get me and to get its claws into me. I really enjoy Dragon Age, but I don't know, my heart is
In the stars.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. That's very poetic and what I should have said.
Who is your Mass Effect 2 boyfriend?
Don't pretend you don't know. Don't you pretend that I haven't at length told you about each one of my BioWare boyfriends. You know, because you don't like him. It's Caden.
Commander Shepard, captain of the Normandy, the first human Spectre, savior of the Citadel.
Headache guy, right?
Headache guy Caden. Only I can fix his headaches. I assume.
Love is the cure.
It is the perfect space opera, power fantasy. Shepard is such a... I mean, I know he is what you make of him, her, because it's a role-playing game. But as a power fantasy blank slate and Earth's greatest hero, etc., it's just bang on. Just the perfect avatar of heroism and space exploration and Earth's greatest hope and saving humanity and saving the galaxy and all those like big, brash Hollywood blockbuster style science fiction tropes, along with some like quite cool hard sci-fi, quite an affinity for real sciencey sci-fi, which is my exact bag when it comes to literary sci-fi or what have you. So it's all of those things that I love about science fiction and space and kind of spacey imagery and spaceships and sexy spacesuits, and it's just everything I want in a space set science fiction RPG. It's like they scraped my brain and made the science fiction RPG that I wanted most of all. I want to talk about two things in particular. One, the beginning of the game. Two, the end of the game.
And all the bits in between.
And then, strap in, because I'm going to talk about all the stuff that happens in between. No, the beginning of the game, it's such a powerful opening. It's the one where Shepard dies in the prologue, which is bold as far as sequels go. But then there's the resurrection, and the kind of prologue ends on the re-reveal of the Normandy, and you've got Joker there, and it's so wonderfully cinematic, a real sense of like drama and cinema. And for me, I think it was the first time I had that sense of a real like slick, glossy, high drama Hollywood blockbuster science fiction in my video game where I was that character.
It's good to be home, huh, Commander?
I guess we'll have to give her a name.
It's a great, great moment and such a ballsy introduction to Mass Effect 2 where your ship is destroyed and then you asphyxiate in like a hard vacuum and then burn up on re-entry to a planet. So as a statement of intent, that was superb. And then the end of the game that it all builds to is that famous like suicide mission where everything is at stake, anyone can die, all your decisions will pay off. Maybe that was how Mass Effect 3 left some people feeling a bit shortchanged, because the end of Mass Effect 2, conversely, is so full of consequence and it's so impactful and it's so varied and it's so dependent on all the little things you've done, like big and small character things and like resource gathering, and whether you did this side quest and picked up this shielding for your ship, etc., and it was so full of consequence that made everything leading up to that feel so meaningful and so individual and so personalized, which is, I mean, isn't that why we play RPGs? Isn't that why I play RPGs anyway?
The problem is, Jane, if you're living on a space arc, everything's going to be space already. So you'd be playing this game, it'd be like you playing a game about being in a video studio.
Mike, I have some terrible news for you. When we eventually go to space, it probably won't be like Mass Effect 2.
What?
We'll probably be toiling in Elon Musk's space mines. And there won't be any space boyfriends.
Oh,
It'll
Jane,
just be drudgery and space mining. So I'm gonna need Mass Effect 2 to get me through the terrible space mines that assuredly the space arc will eventually transport us to, because it's all a con.
I wish they still made role-playing games like they used to. These days, it's all big choices and visceral combat. I miss those old games where you had to remember to drink water, and it took 5 hours real time to fly somewhere.
I I'm a very indecisive person, which is why... Oh.
Sorry, that's such a bad joke.
Which is why I have a lot of honourable mentions. Rise of the Tomb Raider, the entire Dishonored series, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Nier Automata, Horizon Zero Dawn, Batman Arkham City, I'd say Arkham Asylum, but that was in the previous decade. Don't you feel old? Now, it was very, very difficult for me to choose, hence all the honourable mentions. It was down to the wire right at the end between this and Dishonored 2, because it's such a good series and the sequel was just such a great build on the original. But ultimately, it has to be Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning that I saved from the apocalypse. I'm raising myself because it wasn't actually very widely loved. It was very, very much loved by the people who did play it, but it made the mistake of coming out right after Skyrim. And all the studio imploded as well because of some weird financial things as well, which meant that there was never a sequel, never anything like that. But I just loved that game so much. I'm an indecisive person, but in Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, you are the fateless one, which means that as you're building your character, you can change whatever. You are a stealthy mage 1 minute, and then you can change and be a melee character the next. And I've seen games doing that again since then, and I'm like, I know where you got that from. At least I like to think that it's from Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. Like Mike with his choice in Dark Souls, with Kingdoms of Amalur, I've not actually ever finished the game, but I've just loved that world so much and spent so much time in it. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent blacksmithing in Kingdoms of Amalur. I'm probably too ashamed to say. I do all the side quests. I like going and finding a random new cave and finding the new lore stones that you find out about the world a little bit more, and hearing all the weird accents, because they couldn't quite do the British accents and the Irish accents quite right.
We are the soldiers of summer.
The Scottish accents are the strangest ones, I have to say.
Another survivor. Are there any more?
Where are you from?
Which bit of Scotland again?
The Well of Souls was a dream that was almost too good to come true.
I know no one Scottish who sounds like that. But it's so endearing and I love it. It's a great opening as well, because you design your character and then you're immediately dumped in a pile of corpses. And you're like, okay, what's happening here? You find out that you're like the end of this amazing experiment, and because you've come back to life, you have no fate. And you're in a world where everyone has their path and there's all these cycles. It's this wonderful, weird idea that the story is built upon. All the characters are like, oh, this is different, you're different, this is weird. You have to be the only one to save the day, and that's what you want from like those power fantasy games. It's like, yes, it's me. I'm the greatest.
You just changed how the world was supposed to work. How did you do that?
Also, one of the greatest things it does is, you know how you spend ages in a character creator and then as soon as you get armor, you never see your face ever again? Well, not in Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, because you can toggle your hood or hat or armor piece to be hidden, but still wear it and get all the bonus stats. So I was able to have my character with her sweet hair still on show and all of the amazing tattoos that I gave her on her face and everything. It's just like the little touches like that I really enjoyed, and just the color palette of the whole thing as well. You can tell that it's heavily based on like World of Warcraft, and like I think initially the game they wanted it to be an MMORPG, but then when they saw none of the others were like beating World of Warcraft, they were like, let's just make it a single player. But it just means you have this wonderful color palette of Warcraft, but in a single player game, so you don't have to interact with any other human beings, and really that's all I want in video games.
They'll be dead in the apocalypse anyway.
Yeah, exactly. MMORPGs is pointless, but there's no one else left on the planet. One of my favourite things in this game is the part of the title, Reckoning. The combat is amazing, and you build up your gorge, your Reckoning gorge, your gauge, however you would like to say. You get this prompt and you can just get everyone down to low health, and then you do this Reckoning move. The animations are just so intense, and I just remember like when we were playing on the channel and Luke seeing it for the first time and just being like, whoa! Go!
Oh no!
Go!
Oh
and
no!
whoa!
Hammer that XP!
Yes! And then
then their Soul came out.
I've not really seen RPGs do combat that well. It's kind of like this weird thing where it's a little bit Devil May Cry-ish in the way that you can just really zip around depending on like your character setup. Whereas like Skyrim, as much as I love it, you're like flame. Like the combat is rubbish in Skyrim. Like no offense to Skyrim, it's a brilliant game and I love the world building, but it's very low on that side of the gameplay. Kingdoms of Amalur, Reckoning, you are the Reckoning and you feel powerful. And also, I can't mention Kingdoms of Amalur without mentioning the amazing music by Mr. Grant Kirkhope. Hello Grant, if you're watching. Beautiful orchestral music. I would get goosebumps like walking into a new area and hearing the and I'm like, yes. And it's funny because like I don't think it would have originally been the game that I would have chosen as my game for the decade. A lot of it is tied to this channel. It has become a running joke, but it's a running joke that I absolutely love. And just things like after I spoke about it, if you go on Steam now, one of the top reviews was Ellen was right. When like that, but
that's why it's the best game.
But it's lovely to think because now when I think of that game, I think of people saying, "Oh, thanks for recommending that." It's not only tied to like the happy memories of when I initially played it when it first came out. It's also just the happy memories of working on this channel and the nice people watching and all the nice things that they said about this weird game that I'm really obsessed with. I have multiple characters going in that game and I've still not finished it. And I love it. I love it so much and everyone should play it, yes.
So we're off on a space arc, is it? Well, I'll definitely need my copy of Red Dead Redemption. And also Red Dead Redemption 2, I'm lumping them together because technically it's one story. It's basically one long game because you start off with Arthur's story and it rolls naturally into John's story. Really, you can't separate the two games. So, but if I carry on talking and everyone else stops talking, that means that I win the conversation. So yeah, looks like I won. One. Yeah, good.
No.
Well, all right, so it'll probably be Red Dead Redemption 1 then, because that was the first one, and the best one, when did it come out? 2010, I think? So it just snuck into the decade. I don't know if Red Dead Redemption 1 is the best game of the last 10 years, or the best reviewed game of the last 10 years. I think it only got like an 8 out of 10 on Eurogamer when it came out, something like that, yeah, which is interesting. But it's, for me, I think it's probably the game I enjoyed playing the most in the last 10 years, and the game that I sort of invested myself in most in the last 10 years. And I think a lot of that is down to the world and the characters and the story. And I understand it's not everyone's cup of tea, like the Western genre, you know, that's not for everyone. And John Marston, he's a character that, while he is great, I could understand certain people, not naming any names, Mike,
hi,
who doesn't understand the story because he hasn't thought about it properly.
That's definitely it, yeah, that's definitely it.
But it's an epic Western set in this like grand open world starring a flawed main character who is trying to atone for his past misdeeds, and he has a great voice, as Jane rightly points out. I think a lot of the appeal of the character is down to his voice.
Howdy, miss. What are you doing out here?
But yeah, I mean, you know, I like Grand Theft Auto games, but all the protagonists in them are so unlikable that it makes it hard to invest yourself so fully in the game. And also, those Grand Theft Auto games, they really go hard on that kind of really heavy-handed satire of like American culture. And it's like, what if there was a burger chain called Dick Burgers? Satire. Whereas Red Dead Redemption doesn't do any of that. It's still a story about America, and it is a story about the modernization of America and the way that the country has changed, but it does it in a much more honest and heartfelt way than the Grand Theft Auto games do. And with Red Dead Redemption 2, which I'm not talking about, all right, fine, but also I am a bit, like the story, it runs through and it gives you this epic arc that I don't think a lot of other games give you, that kind of span of time and that amount of time spent with those characters. I think Mass Effect 2 is another game that does that kind of thing, and that's why I would give an honourable mention to Mass Effect 2. But yeah, Red Dead Redemption, John Marston is great, the world is great. I'm a big fan of, I guess, what you would call the great outdoors, like big, epic landscapes. I really love like the North American wilderness and the Rockies. I took took a holiday this year to the Canadian Rockies. The scenery up there, the mountains and the forests and the rivers and the waterfalls, that brought back to me that kind of feeling I had exploring Red Dead Redemption, just enjoying the beauty and the majesty of nature and the world in its natural state. That, again, you don't get that in a lot of video games. And some of the best stuff to do in Red Dead Redemption is just to go out into the wilderness and see things and see animals and look at rivers and forests and just spend time not doing anything, which is, you know, as fun as the missions where you just have to go and shoot people and then carry something along a yellow line and drop it off. The lasso is great. What is a shame that they took out and why Red Dead Redemption 1 is a better game is because you can get drunk and stagger around the place with euphoria physics. So yeah, that is another reason that Red Dead Redemption 1 beats Red Dead Redemption 2.
Well, if it ain't, Marston, ain't it?
You look like a blackjack player. A handsome blackjack player. Yes.
All that stuff is great, and the music, the soundtrack, I think it's one of the only games in recent memory that I've actually put the time in to get 100% in. And when you get 100% in it, you get an FBI suit, which means that you don't change honor or get in trouble with the law, but you've done everything in the game, so it's kind of pointless. So I spent all that time doing it, got this suit, and I was like, hey, well, it's nothing to do in this now. But yeah.
Dress up's your favourite bit anyway.
Yeah, the dress up is a lot better in Red Dead Redemption 2, I've got to say. There were some alright outfits in 1, but if you want dress up, 2's your game. Like, the gameplay isn't groundbreaking. Like, none of the individual parts of Red Dead Redemption are groundbreaking or even a lot better than other similar video games of the type. It's just the sum of those parts, I think, is greater. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, is what I'm trying to say. And I think there's just something about the mood that Red Dead Redemption evokes, the time, the place, the setting, the story, and the kind of the person who is from a certain time where they had a place in the world and the world has changed. The world has turned and left them where they are, and they don't know where they fit into that new world. And I think that's a really interesting story. Did they explore it perfectly? Probably not, but I think they had a good go at it, and it was very interesting and satisfying. And I would say that, yeah, in the last 10 years, that's the game that I think has affected me the most and that I've spent the most time and invested myself in the most. So that's my pick. Honorable mention to Mass Effect 2 for, doing similar stuff. I just prefer cowboys to spacemen. And my other honorable mention is going to be Portal 2, because Portal 2 is one of the funniest, best written games I've ever played.
Oh, for God's... They told me that if I ever turned this flashlight on, I would die. They told me that about everything. I don't even know why they bothered giving me this stuff if they didn't want me to use it. It's pointless.
And the puzzles were brilliant and fun, but just the story and the acting and the jokes were brilliant in that. But yeah, Red Dead Redemption +2.
No.
And and Mass Effect 2 and Portal 2.
So those were the 5 games from the last decade that we would save in the oncoming 2020 apocalypse. It's happening, people. Get prepared. It's all going down, but what games would you save? Let us know in the comments down below. Are there any that you would agree with us on? Let us know if you will help us carry that very heavy disc onto the spaceship. Thanks for watching. It's nearly 2020. Why not reward yourselves with some more videos? Here is some music that blew our minds in video games, so other things that we loved in games. And right now, outside Xbox, have already started their Christmas challenges. So who is going to be the champion? You must watch to find out, and subscribe if you like this video.